If you were able to walk into a room, confident that you would be well received, seen, heard, and appreciated by others, and all it took was a few changes in how you navigate your everyday relationships, would you be willing to make those changes? It is possible to be both fully authentic and to experience the best relationships of your life. Now, here's the host of Navigating Complicated Relationships with behavior expert Mikki Gaffen Stone.
Hello and welcome to this very special episode of Navigating Complicated Relationships here on the Inspired Choices Network. I am Mikki Gaffen Stone, your host, and I am welcoming today a very special guest, David Collier, who has a really important message for everyone. He has a story to tell you, and a number of you will recognize this. And for those of you that don't, I'd love for you to really pay attention to what he's telling you, because there are people you know who are facing this. This is parental alienation, a dad's perspective. This is something that David Collier knows more about than anyone should. His story is heart-wrenching and absolutely important for all parents and educators to be aware of. The children who are subject to having one parent alienated from them by the other grow up often completely unaware of the manipulations that they've been subjected to. They believe what they hear because they really have little else to work with. Why would you not believe your parent? And what child even considers that their parent could be lying to them? So today we're going to investigate how this has impacted David, his children, and we're going to learn a whole lot from him today. So David, welcome to Navigating Complicated Relationships. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
So tell me what you'd like to begin with. Where would you like to start your story?
Oh, I grew up in a loving, safe household. My parents were on the same page. They were the model couple, I guess, for marriage. They met in public school and stayed together until they passed. And I had, I would say, a perfect childhood where there was no fighting. It was a calm household. I could say something that I don't like my mom's cooking to my dad, and I would get the look, and that was enough to know that I stepped over the line. They supported each other. They had each other's back. And it had always been in me to be a father. It was just part of me. And so I had met someone online about 1996, and we dated for a few years. There was a lot of red flags. I wasn't used to the family dynamics that I saw in her family. It was the opposite of mine. People were using people, and it was all about how they were perceived by others.
What kind of red flags would you say, looking back, that really stood out, in hindsight? Because I appreciate that given your upbringing, you really didn't have a manual for what these red flags were. But what would you say they are now, so that somebody listening might recognize something?
I would say the lies started early, like very on in the early stages of the relationship. She would lie to my face. And I knew there was issues in the family, and I didn't realize, and I didn't know anything about narcissism at the time. But there was a pattern in her family, matriarchal families where the daughters were put on a pedestal, the boys were just there taking up space, and having a different personality inside a home rather than outside to portray who they were.
So at the time, how did you reconcile yourself with what was going on? How did you handle being lied to? Like, because we usually have a story for ourselves, right? Oh, this
Right.
just means that. So what did that look like?
And I'd started working with abused kids in '94, a couple years earlier, before meeting this girl. And I saw the ability for someone to change, to grow. And so I dragged my ex-wife to many counselors over the years. And she even said, after we left one meeting, I swore I wasn't going to talk about myself. And that was her philosophy, that she didn't want to deal with her past. And it was always put back on me. And I've had counselors tell me, they pull me aside saying that I was a good father, that the issues in the family weren't me. And I always tried to take the high road right from the beginning. And I saw this relationship between my mother and father where they worked on things together. It was unconditional love. And when I got in this relationship, it was conditional. Um, and
Yeah.
and
Sorry.
I beat myself up for years for not paying attention to the red flags and running. I did when she lied to my face the first time, and but I took her back. She begged me to take her back. She says, I have no idea who I am. And I thought, okay, she'd want to work on that. But later she had said to me, I feel like you're making me choose between my family and you, and it's always going to be my family. So having me being an important part of her life was not really in her grand scheme of things.
Wow. So at what point in all of this did children come into the picture?
So in 2002, we started having children. Um, and we wanted to move out of the city that we were living in to raise the kids in the country. And so we moved to where we didn't know anybody. And I decided to be a stay-at-home dad, which my mother stayed at home, and it was a terrific experience for me, having somebody there, consistent and reliable. So I stayed at home. So I was alienated from people I knew. And I didn't realize it at the time because I was so consumed with being a father. It just came natural to me being a father. Everything I did was for the kids. And I had an awesome relationship with my daughter. We used to be outside playing with insects and worms, and she just loves that to this day. And by the time she could understand conversations is when I caught my ex-wife trying to alienate the kids from me.
Now, can you tell us a little bit about what parental alienation is at this point, just in case there's somebody listening that's not clear? I'd like to include them in the conversation too.
Right, brainwashing the child, talking bad about the other parent. The first thing I remember hearing my ex-wife telling my daughter when I was firm with her that she had done something wrong, I heard her say to my daughter, "It's not you, it's him." And all I was trying to do was set boundaries for our child.
And were you able to have a conversation about that at the time, about the whole, I want to set boundaries, what are you doing?
Good question. Because at this point in the relationship, I was controlled by my ex-wife, and I knew if I should confront her, there'd be a reaction. She would be angry. So there was abuse signs early on in the relationship towards me.
So
and
you're
then
walking on eggshells at this point.
yes.
Okay. Wow. That's really tough. And when did you notice that what your ex-wife was doing was affecting children? When did you notice a difference in the kids?
In 2005, I went to my first counselor, and this woman counselor, and at the time my ex-wife was pregnant with our second child. The first thing the counselor said to me was, "How dare you think about leaving your wife while she's pregnant?" So it didn't matter that I was being abused and that my child was being used against me as a pawn and being lied to, manipulated. It was just that I was supposed to be a father to stay in a relationship. And I don't feel we'd ever say to a woman, why are you leaving your abusive partner? You're pregnant with a child, his child, but he's abusive. You need to stay in that relationship. And
so there's clearly an imbalance between how a male is viewed in this situation and how the mother to be is viewed.
yes. And so I left that counseling session feeling like I had no supports at all. I tried to see a counselor and I was being shamed for protecting myself and my child.
Did you try again? Did you try with a different counselor, or was, I don't know how limited the options are where you are. I know some places it's very difficult to get a counselor in the first place.
Right. Well, our second child was born in 2005, and when he started to get older, and was struggling with his emotions and school and things, then I did start seeing another counselor, and my youngest did go as well to the counselor for some play therapy.
Okay.
So I decided that I would stay in that relationship for the kids because I had no support. The shelters for men and their families that are escaping domestic abuse are very rare, few and far between.
Right. So it's important to note. That's
yes.
The lack of resources must have been so distressing for you. Like just no options. Wow. What do you do with that?
Yes. And because my ex-wife was so adept at pretending to be a perfect mother outside the home, my family, she alienated me from my family because they had no idea what was going on. I tell them, but they couldn't believe it. And with our family being as close as we are, they didn't understand how toxic some families can be.
Right. Well, I've found in my experience that, working with different families and so on, that it's nigh on impossible to wrap your head around an experience that you simply haven't had yet. A type of family that is just alien to how you were raised. And so I can imagine that was just, it's very, very difficult for them to comprehend what you're saying. The words make sense, but they don't land. They're
Right.
very difficult to understand that.
Yes, it was hard for me as well, even though I was going through, it was hard for me to process.
Right. So
And
you were
being,
basically in a position of not a whole lot of support, some simply because they didn't understand, others because they were prejudging and bringing their own agenda. And I'm thinking of that first therapist that you mentioned. I mean, as somebody who's worked in therapy, I'm appalled that this person would bring their own personal agenda to the table, but I know that happens. That must have been so difficult for you.
it was, and being an empath, I feel emotions a lot stronger, and I feel, and I could see what the kids were going through as well, how they were being pulled in two different ways.
Right.
And it broke my heart.
That's yeah, it has to have done. We're going to go to a break in a moment or two, but when we come back from that, I would love to hear more about being an empath, actually, and how that has affected you as a parent, who's on the receiving end of a whole lot of manipulation and abuse. Like being an empath, that must be extra hard. So I'm just going to let the audience know that we are going to a break now, but please don't go anywhere. You are listening to David Collier, who has a really important story to share with you. And thank you for being here. I am Mikki Gaffen Stone, your host of Navigating Complicated Relationships, here on the Inspired Choices Network. Don't go away. We have more for you. And at the end of this session, there will be more from David about how you can get in touch with him and how he might be able to help you if you are in a similar situation. So don't go away. We will be back in just a moment.
What if your relationships could be a source of delight instead of a source of struggle? In a world where human interactions are anything but straightforward, tuning in to Navigating Complicated Relationships with behavior expert Mikki Gaffen Stone will offer you insights, tools, and a whole new level of understanding for you to use right now. Listen for Navigating Complicated Relationships with Mikki Gaffen Stone, Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Mountain, 9 a.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email become a host at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com.
This is Navigating Complicated Relationships with Mikki Gaffen Stone. To participate in the program, join the live studio audience in our chat room at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com. You can also send an email to Mikki@gaffenstone.com. Now back to the program.
Welcome back, everyone. You are listening to Navigating Complicated Relationships on the Inspired Choices Network. Today, it's not about me. Today, it's about David Collier and his story. He's being incredibly brave to show up and share this with you. It's such a tough story to have lived and be living. And I don't know about you, but I'm feeling it. This is a heart-wrenching story. So we're back. Previously, we were discussing how there's an imbalance between how men, fathers, are viewed as opposed to the mothers and mothers-to-be, and the lack of resources for men who are in this incredibly tough situation. Like when you have no support and you feel isolated, that has to be the toughest place in the world to be. As human beings, we're not meant to be isolated. So that is particularly tough. And Dave is an empath. So on top of that, he has a whole lot of access to other people's emotions. And we're going to hear more about that now. David, if you're ready, I would love to hear about that, please.
Sure. Yeah, I was sensitive as a child, and I didn't realize as an empath until a few years ago. I didn't know anything about it. But when I started working with teenagers around 1994, I think that helped me to connect with them. And I still work with teenagers in the high school, and something just stands out about students. I know there's been one boy in a school that was extremely tough, and he hated men. And I had said to the teacher, well, I'll see if I can make a connection with him. And she said, he hates men. I doubt that it's going to happen. And just by being vulnerable in the class and being able to cry about my experiences, he said to the teacher privately, he said, well, he's been through a lot, hasn't he? And she said, yeah. He said, well, I can respect that he's able to cry, open up in front of the class. And so I have made a great connection with that boy. And from the boy in 1994 that asked me to adopt him, that's what's kept me in the field. I feel I can feel when other kids are struggling, and I've been able to warn administration at the school that there's something going on, and it turns out there has been. I hope it makes me a better listener. I don't always attune to what they're saying. I'm still learning.
And do the school listen to you when you go and tell them about this?
Unfortunately, no.
I wondered because
Yes.
it's institutions, whether you're in Canada, whether you're in the US, honestly, whether you're in the UK, excuse me, they, excuse me, I beg your pardon, they don't listen well.
No,
It's a common
no.
problem. So what do you do when you have this information and they're not listening to you?
It's tough because you're going against an a company that has its own agenda for just making sure they're receiving money from the government and maintaining status quo. And I live in a rural area, so we are not as progressive as the larger areas, I think.
I can
But I,
understand that. I'm in rural
yeah,
Colorado and we have school district 1, which means it's the original school district and they're still doing things the way they did
wow.
them before. So
Oh,
I understand that. So how does your work and interactions with your own children, how do they affect each other? Like, do you learn things at work that you can bring to your kids? Like, how is your relationship with your kids now?
uh,
A lot of
that's a
questions.
that's a long story.
Please go for
Well,
it. We have time.
I've learned a lot as a parent about being a teenager, about being a child in this era. It's not the 80s where I grew up in school.
Right.
The kids, the one main thing I think I've learned is the kids see through the hypocrisy. They see that adults are not listening, even though they say they are. Um, Often adults have their own agenda, and the kids are not being valued for what they bring into the world. Um, my children at young ages, I was surprised at their thinking process, and calling out hypocrisy and for the way people are treated. So that was very eye-opening for me, and I think I respect um, children more now for their ideas, and I want to incorporate more of their ideas. And before I spoke in Cambridge this past summer, I asked a class for ideas and concerns they have that they wish adults would listen to. One of the main one was social media, that they feel like they have to be perfect. Uh,
Yes.
it,
Yes.
it it's a real concern for kids, and they're addicted to their phones, of course, which I never had 40 years ago. So
Right.
it's a different world. And I don't mean to paint schools and teachers all with one paintbrush, because there's amazing teachers out there. There's a lot of politics in the whole chain of command,
Yeah.
but there was actually a grade 8 teacher that may have saved my oldest's life, because she struggled in grade 8 with mental health, and the school was still like, well, we don't want to talk about that because she was told it might be contagious. Um, the old way of thinking.
Right.
Uh, but it was that teacher that went out of his way to make sure my daughter was listened to when she couldn't talk to her parents, and he went to the hospital to visit her more than once. Um,
Those teachers can
so
make all the difference. They really can.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. And right now in Ontario, the government wants to have the teachers tell families when the children are using different pronouns at school. That the government wants the parents to know about that. there's a lot of students that come to school for a safe place away from home because we don't know what's going on there
Yes.
or
Yes.
how bad it is. So the kids need that privacy because there's still a very conservative idea that a child is supposed to be the way some adults want them to be, rather than loving them for who they are.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a very vulnerable population too, extremely vulnerable. I just want to mention, because this is something that I've noticed in myself and in other people actually, is when you have experience of abuse, particularly to do with children, whether it was you as a child or whether you've witnessed that or had it up close and personal kind of thing, there are a couple of ways that you can go with that. And one is you perpetuate it, the cycle keeps going. And the other one is to do what you have done and become a child advocate, become a really strong sort of person who is there for the child, who hears them, who sees them, and who recognizes that, they are not just to be moved from point A to point B and told what to do, that's not a life. That's not how you handle kids. So I see that you have taken this horrible experience, this trauma, and you're turning it into a wisdom, into a benefit that you can bring to other kids. And I just want to recognize that in you right now and say, this is an amazing thing that you're doing, that from your pain, you're bringing something positive for other kids. And that should never be underestimated. So I want to thank you for that. That's an amazing thing you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah. And when I started working with kids, I was appalled by what their childhood was like, what adults did to them. And so I want to use my privilege of the childhood I had that was almost perfect, and compare it to what some children suffer now, and let them know it's not supposed to be that way. Adults are failing kids in many ways, and it breaks my heart that. And at the end of my marriage, I became angry when the separation was finally signed off. I was angry, not angry at my ex, but angry that, well, not angry for the marriage, what she did to me, but what she did to the kids. The
Yeah.
kids never asked to be put in that position.
Right.
Their life could be different. Their kids don't have to go to counseling because of, or shouldn't have to go to counseling because of adults' issues.
Yeah, I find that happens, well, way more often than it should. But, my mind just went to court processes, and courts never ask the kids. They really don't. At least that was my experience growing up. I'm the child of 2 divorces. And, neither time did anybody ask me what I thought on the subject, or where I wanted to be, or where I felt safe. And I don't see that has changed in the interim. Like, it just doesn't improve. People are not looking at the kids. They're not asking the kids. And I think your perspective is so valuable here that, I would love for you to make as much noise as possible about this in as many places as possible, so that somebody somewhere starts to get the picture on this one. I mean, it's so important. And I just need to let you know, we do have another break coming up, and I'm so glad you have more story to share, because this is such an emotive subject. I'm really feeling it, and I'm very sure the listeners are feeling it. And I can see that you are too, and of course you are. So thank you for being brave and showing up. And listeners, please don't go anywhere. We have more for you. And David is going to have ways for you to contact him and to get in touch and find out what kind of resources there are for you, or what he's tried and what worked and what didn't. So hang in there. We will be right back after this break on navigating complicated relationships here on the Inspired Choices Network.
What if your relationships could be a source of delight instead of a source of struggle? In a world where human interactions are anything but straightforward, tuning in to Navigating Complicated Relationships with behavior expert Mikki Gaffen Stone will offer you insights, tools, and a whole new level of understanding for you to use right now. Listen for Navigating Complicated Relationships with Mikki Gaffen Stone, Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Mountain, 9 a.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
How wonderful would it be to carry your favorite Inspired Choices Network host with you throughout your day? Well, now you can. Inspired Choices Network now has its very own mobile app. Our free app offers live streaming shows, along with thousands of podcasts and TV episodes. Our shows cover a wide variety of topics. Whether you're waking up with us, carrying us through the day, and taking us to bed with you, we're always here for you to enjoy. We're easy to find. Just search for Inspired Choices Network in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store.
This is Navigating Complicated Relationships with Mikki Gaffen Stone. To participate in the program, join the live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also send an email to Mikki@gaffenstone.com. Now back to the program.
Welcome back, everyone. I was just waving my phone at you to show you that you can find us on the Inspired Choices Network on your app and carry us with you, because there's lots of awesome shows. And this one in particular is, I think it's the first show that we've done of this kind. And I think we need more of this, don't you? I would love feedback from listeners. You can email me, Mikki@gaffenstone.com. You can contact me on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram. That's basically where you can find me. And David is going to tell you in a moment where you can contact him. So get your pens out, have your paper ready, and we're going to dive right back in with the question of, I mentioned it before, but then we kind of ran off on other things. What is your relationship like today with your kids?
I was separated in 2019. I realized in 2015 how bad the abuse was getting. So I asked for separation in 2019 because I saw the kids being put in the middle of this, and it was blatantly in front of the kids. She was using the kids as pawns. And I thought, if I leave, then maybe she'll stop using the kids. It unfortunately got worse. So the relationship with my oldest, who I had a terrific relationship with before, it's been strained. Time will tell if it can be repaired or not. My youngest struggled during COVID in school. So I asked for a transfer when we went back into the schools so I could see where he was struggling and see where I could help. And it was actually beneficial for the relationship. And my youngest now sees who I am, and the relationship's still intact. So that was the best move for me there.
Right. Do you get to see your oldest very much at all? I'm sorry if that's a really painful question, but
no, it's hard because I think she needs space right now. So I'm not seeing her at the moment. I tell my kids I love them every time I see them. I have since they were little, and hopefully my oldest will, with some space, will realize maybe what she was told in the marriage by her mom wasn't all true.
right.
Yeah, it's
Do they ever ask you about the things that they've been told? I mean, it can be difficult to know where, something is out of line in order to ask. I know this as a child who's experienced the alienation, and I didn't realize about the alienation. I didn't realize what was going on until I was much older. And it was quite a shock to me, and I had to reconcile, oh, okay, this parent who I thought these things about was actually manipulating me over here. And it's a lot for a child to process. So, and I didn't know to ask those questions. Do your kids know that? Do they, have they shown you that at all?
I get the sense they've been manipulated by their mother into listen to what mom tells you, but don't ask questions, and yes, avoid the truth.
Right.
I had,
that may take a while.
it might take a while. I've had many people say it's going to take a few years, probably, but the oldest will come back around. I'll keep my fingers crossed, and I won't close any doors. And I said to my oldest that that I love them unconditionally, and if they want to disown me, that's up to them. And yeah, it's amazing to see this from being in it now, because I never would have imagined what it was like. And in 2000, what was it, 2019, it was October 27th, it was a Sunday. I had moved out hoping that my ex could keep the house for the kids. And so I couldn't afford at the time to see the kids. It was killing me not to have the kids in my day-to-day life, not to be there full time. I got tired of the hamster running around the wheel and the thoughts not stopping. And so that Sunday morning, I tried to end my life.
Wow.
And it was the next morning that I had a total change of thinking. I thought, how dare I end my life because somebody abused me? How dare I take my children's father away from them? I don't care what lies they've been told. It doesn't change the fact that who I am and that I'm their father. Too many people were too ready to buy the story of my ex-wife about me being a terrible father, because we hear that too common.
Right, and people are very quick to believe the negative. They always
Yes.
to that. I'm sure you found when your marriage ended that people were very quick to take sides and decide who was to blame. And to me, this is a fascinating process because it's none of their damn business. They're not in there, they're not in the marriage, but people do this. And it's it's very easy to say, oh, he was a terrible parent. Yeah, I can totally see he would be.
Yes.
Just, people don't think, they just jump.
And my lawyer said to me, she said, if I didn't know your story, I would believe her. She's such a good liar.
Right.
And that's what I ran up against.
Yeah.
Having to prove who I was.
I think sometimes with someone, the way you're just describing your ex-wife, it sounds like she probably was able to believe herself. Sometimes people tell lies in such a way that they convince themselves, and that is an unstoppable force. When that person really believes the nonsense they're saying, there's no chink in the armor. There's nothing you can do to get through, and you're just left wondering what just happened and why is this happening. This is a long period of time for you to have been going through this. Like, wow, that's a lot to handle.
I didn't realize it was 20 years. And I didn't realize how bad the abuse was until my first night that I moved out. I remember lying in bed at night thinking I felt safe for once in many years. That's when I knew that the abuse was bad. I felt the door is locked. I'm not going to be belittled. I'm not going to be talked down to. And then I felt safe. So that's when I knew. And I am diagnosed with PTSD now because of the abuse.
Right.
And so, but through all that, I'm more angry about the innocent kids being put in this.
Absolutely. It's not fair for them. It creates a whole cycle for them that they either perpetuate or break, right?
Yes, and I've been told my ex-wife wanted the kids' love for her and only her, and that validates who she is as a person, is how she looks as a mother. And we hear about deadbeat fathers. Well, why am I being alienated when that was in me? That was who I was. I was a father, and I was an involved father. Everything I did was for the kids.
Right.
And still, it breaks my heart to think about what my kids have gone through, and what kids go through that I see at the school every day. I go to bed thinking about them.
So for people who are listening to this, I would love for you to consider the things that David's telling you, because if you're a teacher, or if you have something to do with schools, you have your own kids, grandchildren, however you come across children and however you come across their parents, you can't necessarily believe what you're hearing. And you can more or less get from the children, though, how they're behaving, because behavior is communication, and the child will show you what's going on for them. If you're in a position to have some influence over a child, please listen, please look and pay attention to that kid, because there could be a situation like David's describing, and that child doesn't need to be isolated anywhere any more than he does. This is not something that we can walk away from if you recognize it. And if you're in a relationship where you're recognizing some of the signs that David's talking about, if you're walking on eggshells and you daren't call your spouse out for something because they're going to, shred you, then these are some red flags, and you need to seriously consider what you're going to do about this, and hopefully find a counselor that's not judgmental. I'd also love for you to get in touch with David. So let me ask him to give you his contact right before we have a break that's coming up. And then we'll do it again at the end, because I really want you to know how to get in touch with him to find out more about what you can do in your situation, what his experience has been, and, what's next? What are you looking at? So, David, how would people get in touch with you?
Thank you. My email is db.collier@icloud.com. And I've started a website that's up and running, but it's not complete yet. It's dbcollier.com.
Great. And what will people find on that website?
I'm going to have some links about parental alienation, narcissistic abuse, places you can go. You can contact me. I've been told that I'm a dog with a bone when I get something in my head.
I would imagine so. This is great information. So if you didn't get to write that down, don't worry, don't go anywhere. We're going to have a quick break. And when we come back, David's going to be able to repeat all of that for you again. So make sure you have your pen, paper, notepad, whatever it is you're using ready. And we will see you in just a minute or two here on Inspired Choices Network with Navigating Complicated Relationships. Don't go away.
What if your relationships could be a source of delight instead of a source of struggle? In a world where human interactions are anything but straightforward, tuning in to Navigating Complicated Relationships with behavior expert Mikki Gaffen Stone will offer you insights, tools, and a whole new level of understanding for you to use right now. Listen for Navigating Complicated Relationships with Mikki Gaffen Stone, Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Mountain, 9 a.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. This is Navigating Complicated Relationships with Mikki Gaffen Stone. To participate in the program, join the live studio audience in our chat room at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com. You can also send an email to Mikki@gaffenstone.com. Now back to the program.
Welcome back, everyone. I am speaking with David Collier today. He is my special guest, and boy, is he bringing some important news for you today. His story is one that's untold so many times by fathers who are being alienated, shunned, and marginalized because there are no resources. There's nothing out there for them, and there's no platform to hear their side. Today, David has that platform, and I'm going to ask him to again tell you how to get in touch with him and that website that's going to be a fabulous resource for anybody who's interested, anybody who's got concerns about a narcissistic relationship or concerns about their children, somebody else's children, alienation. There's going to be a lot of information on that website. So David, give it to us once more.
The website is dbcollier, COLLIER.com, and my email is db.collier@icloud.com.
Perfect. And I would love for people to get in touch with David, please, and to offer support, to show support for the things he's been vulnerable enough to share with us today, because not everybody's brave enough to do that. And not everybody has the possibility to share this kind of deep emotion with you. So, if show him some love, go and send some messages of support. If you have questions, ask questions. If you have information that he could add to his website, do that too. David's in Canada, but this problem is not just in Canada, it's in the US as well. Let's share some resources. So what have you found that's helped you, David, apart from your own sort of ability to transfer from one place to another to be closer to your son? And power to you for doing that. That was a really crucial move, and not many people perhaps could do that. But what would you recommend people try?
I felt the best thing for me was to step back when I saw the children being involved in the separation, being used as pawns and being pulled between each parent. I stepped back, let the children make their decisions when they want to spend time with a parent, and how long. Let them make their decisions and just be myself. The kids know me before separation, and I don't want to change post-separation. I know it has changed me. That whole 20 years of abuse has changed me, and I'm not the same person. My oldest did say, and I don't know whether it was coming directly from her or she was being prompted to say, but she says, I don't know you anymore. But she's not taking the time. My oldest is not taking the time to get to know me again. If you're in this situation, I would say start documenting things in case you ever need it. If you can, hide that documentation. I had to create a drawer, a secret drawer under some shelves to keep journals about the abuse. And safety is key. If you feel your safety is at risk, please look for somewhere safe for the children and yourself. Unfortunately, it's not as easy for a male to find a shelter. For me, at the time, it wasn't an option. So I think that was part of the reason why I decided to stay in that relationship. Get some legal advice. There's so many resources on the internet. But I think it comes down to, if there's children involved, just let them know who you are and that you love them. Right.
So you'll have these kind of resources on your website as you come across them. I think that's amazing, and I'm definitely going to direct people to you for this, because it's crucial. I love that you said give space, because again, my own experience as a child was I was literally one day, my parents were fighting over me, and I was literally in the street with one holding one arm and the other holding the other arm and pulling me in different directions physically. And that kind of memory doesn't go away. And having both parents doing that doesn't help anybody make decisions, you know, and especially a child. And I think I was about 7 at the time. So, you know, it didn't do anything useful. So having the wherewithal and the ability to give a little space, that's not easy to do. That cannot be easy to do. But I think it's a good strategy to try in the absence of, you know, robust support from other people. Yeah, that would be amazing. So we have just a few minutes left. What else would you love for people to know that would either help them or that you haven't yet told us of your story?
I think we need to listen more to the children. When they come to school, they feel more comfortable to tell us how they're feeling. Right. And they don't often feel that comfortable at home. I think as a parent, that's one of the best things we can do for our kids, is to actually listen to them and find out who they are as people. Being in Canada, I often see parents who think their child is going to be the next hockey star, another Wayne Gretzky, or not pushing their child into being an NHL star. Just trying to think of what I haven't mentioned.
Well, while you're thinking of that, I'm just going to jump in and say, you know, I love the passion that I'm hearing from you about helping others. And I'm wondering if you'd be able to put something together where you can go into schools and on teachers' professional development days, you know, present your talk to them and give them, you know, access to your website, give them information so that they know what they're looking at for kids. Because parents, the ones who are being alienated, know they have a problem. The ones who are doing the alienation probably don't think they have a problem, but the teachers are uniquely positioned to see these children and to maybe make a difference. Social workers too. Like I would love to see you go into these different places and give your talk. And, you know, maybe you and I can talk about this later, because I'd love to see how we could arrange that. I think it's powerful, and it's, you know, you could make a difference in that way too. And I'm thrilled you've got this website setting up. That's just amazing. So last things that to say, because we just have a couple of minutes left, literally.
One of the things that I see is very promising is there's not so much toxic masculinity in kids these days that is being handed down from generation to generation. My youngest is an empath as well, and he's not afraid to say I love you, and he's not afraid to hug me in public.
Right.
And it's awesome to see, because there's too much generational abuse that I see in that toxic masculinity. Because in the end, you're just telling kids you love them and that they matter, and that whoever they are and whatever they bring into the world matters.
It does. And I love that you're bringing this to the fore right now. And I have to say, I have 2 boys, and we still tell each other pretty much every day that we love each other. I don't live with them. They're actually in Canada and I'm in the US, but you know, we have that connection, and they don't have the toxic masculinity going on. And I agree with you. I think there's less of that. And boy, that is a good move. That is a very good move. So once again, we have a few seconds. What's that website again?
DB Collier, COLLIER .com, and the email is db.collier@icloud.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming today, David.
Thank you for listening to the Navigating Complicated Relationships show. Mikki returns Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Mountain, 9 a.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. Until then, remember every relationship is a journey, and with the right tools, you can create stronger, more fulfilling connections.